Are you ready for fantasy baseball draft season to get here? So am I. That's why I already started. I drafted my first 2024 fantasy baseball team on Underdog in their contest called the Bullpen. I'm going to walk you through my recent draft to tell you who the best picks were, some players I think are going way too high, or just amazing bargains. If you just can't wait for fantasy baseball draft season to begin, well, there's good news. If you join Underdog, you can get in on the action right now and try the Bullpen. It's their big tournament, only a $5 entry. Gets you in the game. You can draft a fantasy team right now with a chance to win big prizes. You can sign up right now. Click the link in the description below. Make sure to use promo code Endgame because that gets you a 100% deposit match up to the first $100 you put in. So let's go over the logistics. This contest, like I said, it's a best ball draft. There are 20 rounds. Each week you're going to wind up with 10 starting players at different positions and 10 bench players. Again, it's a best ball format. If you're not familiar with how that works, it's going to automatically take the players who generated the most points at each position and put them in your lineup. No setting lineups, but there are also no trades, no waiver wire moves, so you can't change this roster once you're done drafting. Like I said, you have to account for injuries, guys going up and down from the minors, all sorts of things. So you have to kind of have that balance, again, of risk and reward. This is a big tournament, and after the regular season is over, there are going to be 3 playoff rounds. Won't get into all those details again. If you want to check it out, go do that right now on Underdog Fantasy. But let's talk about how I made my build and some of the things that you should look for if you're going to do one of these drafts yourself. The first thing I will always say for any type of draft, any type of strategy, that you need to know your league. Know the settings, the scoring settings you can look for on Underdog if you check it out. For hitters, these are different point totals you can see. Singles, doubles, triples, etc. Stolen bases not listed. Give you a 4 per stolen base. It's different from a roto league. You don't have to win your league in any sort of category. You just have to accumulate points, and you can do that a lot of different ways. If you got a guy who just accumulates a lot of singles like Luis Arias, he's not as valuable in a roto league because he's not getting you any home runs. He doesn't really steal bases, but he's going to collect a ton of points in this type of format, and walks and strikeouts also matter. Also worth noting for pitchers, you basically can ignore relievers because saves don't count, holds don't either. You're not getting points there. It's not a category. Relievers, even the best closer in the game here, is pretty much worthless. It's all about starting pitchers. You want a guy who can accumulate innings, of course, get strikeouts and avoid damage. But really, innings eaters, less exciting in a typical fantasy baseball league, more important in a format like this. Each week you're going to start 3 pitchers. It could be any pitcher, but again, you want it to be a starting pitcher. 3 infielders. That's right, infielders. Any kind of infielder. So all of those guys count the same. You don't have to worry about what position and filling different types of roster spots. It's just any kind of infielder and then 3 outfielders, and then you'll have 1 flex. What does this mean? This means that there's going to be a big discrepancy between infielder and outfielder because at infield, you're going to have 5 different positions to choose from. And then, of course, there's only 3 outfielders. DH is kind of lumped in there with outfielder, but there's not a lot of guys who qualify as DH only. So really what you're going to look into, and this is something that Brendan Tuma, real smart guy who does a lot of breakdowns on Underdog contests for baseball, has labeled as the outfield positional scarcity problem in this kind of tournament. One thing you'll also notice if you jump on to the bullpen is basically the whole first round in terms of ADP is filled with outfielders. Those elite outfielders, they're fantasy studs. This is where you get those 5 category guys. We don't really care about categories in this format, but we care about guys who are studs and getting a lot of dingers, a lot of steals, and just points in general. But in this case, outfielders who are elite are going to be that much more valuable. It's a position that's front-loaded, but you don't necessarily want to go deeper. And so I think it's best in this case to go with more infielders and earlier with outfielders. Pitchers, I'll get to in a second. It's best to explain this by walking you through my first bullpen draft, which I did a couple of weeks ago. And going forward, the names of the other drafters will be hidden to protect the innocent. So in this draft, I drew the 5 spot. Totally fine with that. So a quick glance at this board in the first round. Exactly what I was talking about. The first 9 picks were outfielders. I actually wound up doing another bullpen draft not long after I did this. and the first 10 picks were outfielders. So I'm not saying you have to pick an outfielder in the first round, but well, yeah, I think you have to pick an outfielder in the first round. If you wait, you're going to be left without one of those stud players. And to be honest, although you do love Spencer Strider at pitcher, you do like having a guy like Freddie Freeman there in the infield, the positional scarcity is real. And so you might as well take at least one of those stud outfielders. If you don't in the first round, maybe you're at the end, pick 11 or 12, you're going to on the way back anyways. If you see in this draft, Team 12 here kind of forced to zig while the others were zagging. All those top outfielders were gone. So went with the Freeman-Olsen stack. I don't mind that. You got to like those first 2 picks. But then you wind up with Brian Reynolds as your number 1 outfielder. And then Eloy Jimenez as your number 2. No offense to Team 12, but I don't think that's going to cut it. And besides just wanting to grab one of those stud outfielders early, there is a drop-off that happens really early. Just to be honest, don't think I can trust Mike Trout as my number 1 outfielder or even my number 2 outfielder based on how much time he has missed. Adolis Garcia, love him, but also don't want him as my number 1 guy. Kyle Schwarber, same thing. And there's a lot of risk when you talk about some of those other early high-end outfielders who are going in like rounds 4 or 5. You see Nolan Jones, sure had a great half of a season, but are we convinced he's going to break out even further, or is there a regression because of his massively high and overachieving BABIP? And then Cody Bellinger, do we really know what we're getting next year? Get your stud outfielder early. So I went with Julio Rodriguez. Look, between him, Corbin Carroll, either one would have been fine for me. I'll flip and flop those guys. Mookie Betts, I know he's going to be second baseman this year, but he's an outfielder in this format. If he's there, I would have grabbed him first. Julio Rodriguez, perfect for this format because he is, besides being a 5-tool, absolute stud, and one of the best players in baseball, he's also an accumulator. 654 at-bats last year, one of the highest marks in the majors, and that's important in this format, best ball. You want a guy who's going to be out there. You're not making trades. You're not picking up players. You want somebody who's going to constantly be getting those points. Another really overlooked stat here is going to be doubles. Now, I know, not a roto league, and so you're not worried about specific categories, but singles and doubles, these are going to get those points that are going to be those boring points you don't get unless you're playing, like, let's say in a points league traditionally, but in best ball, those count a lot more than you could realize. There's only so many guys who will hit 30, 40 home runs, but a guy who can hit 30 plus doubles is going to get you a lot of points, and they're not going to be drafted as high. And so some of the mid to late round picks I'll talk about are guys who are going to be great values. Rodriguez is a guy who also, besides getting 30 plus home runs, 30 plus steals, also 30 plus doubles. All right, but moving on, round 2, I went with a guy who is a stud in every format, Jose Ramirez. If you play in points leagues, you already know his value. He's more important than a lot of these other players we've talked about because you're pushing aside any sort of advantage you might get in a specific category, but he's a guy who has great plate discipline, hardly strikes out, walks a lot, accumulates those singles, those doubles. Again, if you know points versus roto, Ramirez is basically a first-round pick. I got him late in the second round here. I'm thrilled with that. Now, what about pitcher? Well, honestly, I don't see a huge difference, maybe Strider aside, just because of so many strikeouts. But after that, let's say you don't get Strider in round 1 because you went with an outfielder. Maybe Garrett Cole. Okay, fine. I see him going early in round 2, but I'm fine waiting with any of these other guys. You got guys like Burns, Gaussman, who I wound up getting, Luis Castillo, Zach Wheeler. You might as well just wait till round 3, 4 and grab one of those guys. You don't need to have an elite staff here. You just need some high-end ace value where you can get from 1 or 2 stud pitchers. You want guys who are just going to be out there consistently. So in this case, I'll almost sacrifice a little bit of the talent, a little bit of the, guys who will help you, let's say, for ratios. There are no ratios here. You want guys who are going to eat up innings and not get, batted around too much. You also want strikeout upside. So even if a guy tends to have a little bit higher a whip, because he'll walk some guys on occasion, maybe give up the occasional home run, but he'll wind up with high strikeout totals and still be out there for 6 innings per start. That's what you're looking for. That's what makes a guy like Logan Webb, who I took in round 5, perfect for this format because he is someone who'll be out there consistently, doesn't have a long injury history. He's going to eat up a lot of innings. He's not elite at getting strikeouts, but he's good enough. And I also love a guy who I didn't get in this particular draft, and I'm kind of bummed about that, but George Kirby is perfect for this format. I did take a little bit of a chance on Glasnow, staying healthy. I mean, when he is healthy, obviously we know Cy Young caliber talent. So with those 3 pitchers, I'm kind of set, and I waited on pitcher a while, as you can see. I know Nolan Arenado got off to a rough start last year, but he made up for it. The guy, again, is not as exciting anymore, but he will definitely accumulate stats. He'll get you the power, those doubles I talked about. He's a nice kind of set and forget there at the infield. And then let's fill the outfield need. So we get the middle rounds here. I'm taking a chance on some guys who have high-end talent and could take another step forward this year. Young players like Jordan Walker. I got Josh Lowe and Riley Green in Detroit. I want to have outfielders who have that high ceiling, who are going to be everyday players, of course, but I don't feel like I have to reach for these players much earlier. So I'm kind of avoiding what I'm going to consider kind of an outfield dead zone, this round 5 and 6 that you see here, were guys who I don't really feel great about. I can wait and get just as much talent a little bit later while filling my pitching staff, and that's what I did. And being a best ball format with these outfielders, I know they can put together big games, big stretches over weeks. That's what I'm looking for. And then I know it's not a dynasty league, but I continue to go young. My infield here, Josh Young, Vinny Pasquantino, and Christian Encarnacion Strand. Now, my thought process here, again, Vinny P, guy who does have at least 20 home run power. He'll get you a bunch of singles and doubles, hit for average. Again, accumulating those point totals. He just has to stay healthy, honestly. I thought he might have a breakout season last year. Young did have a breakout season. You saw how he helped the Rangers. And then in the postseason, that team, definitely a lineup you want a piece of. I love him, getting him that late in round 10. And CES is a guy who can mash, 30 home run upside. He's going to be a potential steal in this part of the draft. In the bottom third of my draft, just a couple of players I've already taken twice. In fact, I've taken them in NFBC leagues as well. I'm going to buy the dip here on Josh Naylor. I don't know why he's going so late. He's not as exciting of a prospect as he used to be, but he had a breakout season last year. He is definitely going to be established as an everyday player, hitting the heart of that Cleveland lineup. He's somebody who I feel is going way too late. And if you watched my sleeper video from earlier this offseason, I talked about Jeimer Candelario. Kind of an odd fit there with the Reds. We just talked about Encarnacion Strand. They have all these young players in that lineup. Where does Candelario fit in? Well, he fits in as the everyday first baseman. He just got an upgrade in ballpark going to Cincinnati. He's already got legit power. He could drive in more runs in this lineup and have a better shot at hitting 30 home runs. And then I took some swings on some more young pitchers here, guys, who can put together good stretches. Again, if my aces stay healthy, these guys aren't in my starting lineup in a best ball format on a week-to-week basis. But if I get some good starts from Bryce Miller, like we saw earlier in his rookie season, Gavin Williams, who has the talent to potentially become a number 2 SP, if not an ace, and then Edward Cabrera, who also just needs to stay healthy and stop walking guys. But look, last round, I'm going to swing at that upside. What I'm not going to do, take someone who really only helps you if you're playing with ratios in a roto format, like a Jameson Taillon. That guy's really not doing much for you here because the strikeouts aren't there. This is a tournament. You've got to take some chances. Look for those breakouts. All told, my roster construction was 7-7-6. I wound up with 7 pitchers, 7 infielders, and 6 outfielders. Again, you probably prefer your flex spot to be filled by an infielder. Doesn't mean that you have to draft more infielders than outfielders, but you're going to get more value there, and you don't have to take on risk. Again, talk about risk with talent coming through, guy breaking out and being ready. Not risk in terms of playing time or injury risk, because that's going to wind up hurting you if you have a guy who misses half the season because you have fewer choices to replace him with. Building on this strategy that I just talked about, my next bullpen draft, I wound up going with 8 infielders, only 6 pitchers, and 6 outfielders. Of course, you're going to do multiple drafts here. It's only a $5 buy-in. Why not? You're going to do some differentiation, hopefully. Grab different players, play around with different roster makeups, see what you like. If you want to get on this, you can join the bullpen while it's still open. Download the Underdog Fantasy app, or you can click the link that's down below in the description. Just if you're signing up as a new customer, remember, use promo code Endgame to take advantage of those special offers and the deposit match. As we get closer and closer to opening day, we'll be doing some live drafts, some live streams on here with you. So hit the notification bell, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed so that you can hop on, maybe draft with me. While you prepare for your league's fantasy draft, check out these players that I think are going way too high or too low based on early ADP.